Among our national institutions there is one, the gallows, to the roots of which antiquarians have not laid bare. Possibly this omission is due to the fact that it is not an institution of which we are proud, possibly also to the fact that it is an institution which we keep as clear from touching as we well can. Nevertheless, the origin and original signification of the gallows are too curious to be neglected. The origin is, moreover, so remote that unless it were pointed out it would be wholly unsuspected. We know pretty exactly the date of the introduction of this institution into our island. We owe it, along with our ale and our constitutional government, to the Anglo-Saxon invaders. There were no gallows in Britain under the Celts. The Kingdom of Kent was founded in 449, and it was then that the gallows first made their appearance among us, and from the Isle of Thanet spread over the whole land. The great god of the conquering races, who invaded Britain and subdued the Britons, was Odin, who has given his name to Wednesday, and this god with one eye had a double aspect. He was god of the air, the wind, and he was also god of the sun. According to the etymology of his name, he was the god of the gale, and the source of all breath, but his one fiery eye was most certainly the sun, and he was represented holding a wheel of gold, and that golden wheel symbolized the sun. Odin was a cruel deity, who demanded sacrifices, and the sacrifices he required were human. In the Elder Edda, a collection of very ancient songs relating to the Norse gods and heroes, who were the same as the gods and heroes of our Anglo-Saxon forefathers, is one mysterious poem, supposed to be sung by Odin himself as he hangs in the world tree, of which no one knows from what root it springs, between heaven and earth for 9 nights. I knew that I hung, in the wind-rocked tree, 9 whole nights, wounded with a spear. And to Odin offered myself to myself, on that tree, of which no one knows, from what root it springs. If on a tree I see, a corpse swinging by a halter, I can so grave runes, and them write, that that man shall with me, walk and converse. That is to say, every victim hung on a tree becomes one of Odin's band, with whom he rides in the storm blast over the earth. Indeed, one of the names of Odin was the hanging god, either because he hung himself, or because he had victims hung to him. The world tree, the great tree in which he hung, the tree which supports heaven and earth, was called Yggdrasil, which means ogre's horse, to express his love of human sacrifices, and all the old nursery tales and rhymes concerning ogres have reference to this great god of the English people. Jack mounts the beanstalk, and above the clouds enters the land of the ogre, with his one eye, who devours men. Jack the Giant Killer, who lives in Cornwall, represents the British Christian fighting against the pagan Saxon, impersonated as the great man-eating ogre. Fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. In this again we have a reference to Odin, who was also called the miller, for the mutter or roll of the thunder was supposed to be the working of his quern, grinding up his human victims for his meal. It is curious that in the west of England there are fields, generally situated in lonely spots, that go by the name of gallows traps, and the popular saying concerning them, is that whoever sets foot in them is predestined to die on the gibbet. The probable origin of this superstition is that these were actual traps for the unwary, in which to catch victims for sacrifice. In certain districts a parcel of land was set apart to the god, and it was agreed that whosoever set foot on it should be sacrificed. Usually this was a stranger, unaware of the sacredness of the ground he trod. He was seized and hung to Odin. We cannot say for certain that this is the origin of the gallows traps, but it is the most probable explanation of their origin, and of the superstitious dread of them still existing among the people. Little by little the idea of sacrifice in these executions disappeared. When Germans, Franks, and Anglo-Saxons became Christian, human sacrifices ceased as a matter of course, but as it was still necessary to put malefactors to death, the same kind of death was adjudged to them as before Christianity was professed. Now a whole series of superstitions exists connected with men hung, and an executioner derived a small revenue from the sale of the cord, or other articles connected with the criminal who had been hung, and these relics were preserved, not out of a morbid love of horrors, but out of a real belief that they were beneficial, that they brought with them protection against accidents and ailments. The plunder of the gallows was sought in the first days of Christianity in England by those who were still pagans at heart, and desired to put themselves under the protection of the old gallows god, Odin, but the original meaning of this robbery of the dead soon faded away, and the practice remained without explanation. Our word gallows is compound. The old word is galls, and gallows means the mound of the gibbet. We speak of the gallow tree, or the wood on the gibbet hill. A German name for it is Rabenstein, the raven stone, not only, perhaps, because ravens come to it, but because the raven was the sacred bird of Odin. When we remember that the gallows on which Odin hung is called Ogre's horse, it is interesting to note a popular riddle asked children in Yorkshire a long, long time ago. What is the horse that is ridden that never was foaled, and rid with a bridle that never had bit? The answer is, of course, the gallows.